Chapter 13. The White Room. The passages are for the servants, Novak explained as the library shelves silently returned to their original position. Towering Heights has 8 floors, all with hidden doors and passages. My room is on the 5th floor, and it has a passage that leads out from the back of my wardrobe. Darkus felt a thrill of excitement as he followed Novak down the narrow corridor. The servants' passages were grey and functional, lit by floor lights, and a stark contrast to the front of the house. They came to a brass gate with a handle. It was an old-fashioned lift, the kind Darkus had seen in the movies. "Get in," he obeyed, and Novak leant across him, pulling the gate closed. The lift whirred and lurched downwards. "Where are we going?" Darkus asked. "The White Room. It's Mater's office and where she meets the people. That's where your friends will be." "They're not my friends," Darkus said. "They're my enemies." "You are so lucky to have real enemies," Novak sighed. "I have to make mine up. They mustn't see me." "Don't worry." Novak fluttered her eyelashes. "No one will see us." "Good," Darkus said, feeling uncomfortable. A delicate bell chimed, announcing they were on the 1st floor. He stepped out of the lift and stepped off after Novak, who was running silently down the corridor on the tip of her toes. She turned left and right, then suddenly stopped and pushed her fingers against the wall, making a hidden handle pop out. Putting her fingers to her lips, she whispered, "We must be very quiet. If Mater hears, we'll be in trouble." Darkus nodded, and they entered a room the size of a bathroom, containing nothing but a bench covered with a sheepskin throw. Novak motioned for Darkus to sit. Opposite the bench was a window into the room next door. "It's a two-way mirror," Novak whispered, sitting down beside him. "We can see them, but they can't see us. Mater uses it to watch models or clients when they're having dress fittings. Look," she pointed up at the speakers in the corner of the room. "We can hear them too." Lucretia Cutter, instantly recognisable by her lab coat and walking sticks, was standing in front of the mirror with her back to them. Darkus swallowed down the confusion of fear and anger that bubbled up inside him when he looked at her. He studied the room beyond the mirror, memorising every detail to tell Virginia and Bertold. There wasn't much furniture, and everything was either white or transparent. To the right was a laboratory bench, like the one at school, only much cooler. The worktop was made of the same shiny white stone as the floor, a silver gas tap rising out of it like a swan's neck, and beside it a powerful-looking microscope. Below the bench was a row of fridges with see-through doors. Darkus could see stacks of Petri dishes and racks of test tubes inside them. A clear perspex shelf stretched across the opposite wall, and Darkus registered the 3 white sculptures sitting on it. a human figure, a beetle, and the DNA double helix. Lucretia Cutter was standing behind a sleek glass desk, which was bare except for a white telephone and a framed photograph. Facing her in their yellow and purple suits were Pickering and Humphrey, looking ridiculously out of place in the spotless room. Darkers couldn't help but smile at the sight of them. Pickering was pointing at Humphrey. His revolting habits led to the infestation. He is disgusting. I, on the other hand, wash 3 or 4 times a day. Shut up, or I'll mash you. Humphrey lifted his massive fist above Pickering's head. Silence! Lucretia Cutter's voice cut through the cousins' bickering. You will give over your property to me for 48 hours to remove every last beetle. Pickering and Humphrey nodded like eager puppies. Whatever you desire, Humphrey spluttered, spraying spittle across a glass desk. Ooh, Pickering squealed. I'm paying you handsomely for beetles and the inconvenience, so I expect you to do exactly as I ask. Inconvenience? Pickering clasped his hands together. No inconvenience at all. It will be a pleasure. You will move out of the building for the duration of the operation, she continued. What? The cousins cried in unison. Where will we go? Humphrey asked. But we can help you, said Pickering. I won't be doing it myself, Mr. Risk. I will be sending my men, Dankish and Craven, to deal with your mound of beetles. You did say it was a mound, cousins nodded. A 6-figure sum will be transferred to your bank on the day you leave, and the funds will clear once the beetles have been removed from your premises and counted. Then you'll be free to return. During the interim, I will make my private suite at the Empress Hotel available for you to stay in. You will not be permitted to talk about this arrangement with anyone. Do you understand? If you do, you forfeit the fee. Pickering and Humphrey nodded. Lucretia Cutter walked around her desk and held out her perfectly manicured hand, her expression unreadable behind the enormous sunglasses. Do we have a deal? Humphrey leapt up. It's a deal, he said, bending down and kissing the back of her hand. Lucretia Cutter's gold lips curled with disgust. Wait! Pickering got to his feet. What about the council? They know about the infestation. They want us to clear the yard. They said, the council will not bother you again, Mr. Risk. I'll make sure of that. Lucretia Cutter pulled her hand away from Humphrey. How do you think I found out about your beetles in the first place? She laughed, a low guttural laugh. I have people everywhere. Right, yes, I see, said Pickering, clearly not seeing at all. She pressed a button on the white telephone in front of her. Gerard? The butler entered with a tray containing 2 documents and 2 gold pens. Sign and date the last page. Lucretia Cutter held out her hand so Gerard could clean it with a steaming hot towel he pulled from a cylinder in his pocket. Darkus crept closer to the mirror. He felt vulnerable so close to the glass, and he had to remind himself that no one in the room could see him. but he now had a clear view of the framed photograph on her desk. The picture was of 9 smiling people in white coats, sitting in 2 rows. Printed in a white box at the top of the picture were the words Fabra Project. "What's the matter?" Novak whispered, alarmed. "Are you ill? You look like you're going to be sick." "That picture," Darkus pointed. "What about it?" Novak came to stand next to Darkus. "Oh, that's from when she was at university. You can hardly recognise her. She looks so different now. Look, her hair is all messy and scraped back. She's wearing glasses and she's smiling. She looks nice, doesn't she?" Darkus's heart was thumping about against his ribs. "What's so interesting about it?" "That," Darkus cleared his throat, finding he couldn't get the words out. "It's my dad." Novak leaned forward. "Which one?" "The one with the beard next to your mum." Novak stared at Darkus. "He doesn't look like you at all." "Novak!" Darkus looked her in the eye, suddenly finding his voice. He blurted out loudly, "Someone's kidnapped my dad and I don't know why." "Kidnapped?" Novak looked frightened. A shadow fell across the mirror and they both looked up. Lucretia Cutter was admiring her reflection in the glass. As she turned her head from left to right, it was as if she was looking right through the mirror into the room. Darkus froze. If there hadn't been glass between them, Lucretia Cutter would have felt his breath on her cheek. "She can't see us," Novak whispered, as though to reassure herself as much as Darkus. "She can't hear us." In the room, Humphrey had signed the contract and was holding the paper out to Gerard. Pickering made a show of reading every word of his, then arranged his face in a thoughtful expression. "Perhaps we could discuss this over dinner?" "There's nothing to discuss." Lucretia Cutter turned away from the mirror. "You either want to sell to me or you don't." Darkus let out a huge sigh, suddenly aware they'd been holding his breath. "Come on, sign it, Pickers. It's £500,000, Humphrey said. "That's £250,000 each." "I can do the maths, Humphrey, thank you." Pickering looked at Lucretia Cutter. "You must really like killing beetles to pay such a large amount of money to do something we'd normally have to pay for ourselves." Lucretia Cutter leant over the desk menacingly. "I'm a collector, Mr. Risk," she hissed. "A very wealthy collector. I've paid more money for a handbag than the figure I'm offering you for those beetles. It's entirely up to you whether you want the money or not." Leaning back on her stick, she propelled herself forwards. "This conversation is over." She looked back at the mirror. "I have something I need to take care of." "Get under the bench." Novak sucked in her breath, pulling at Darkus. "She knows we're here." "What? I thought you said—" "Do as I say, she's coming." Novak kicked the back of Darkus's knees and his legs folded underneath him. "Quick!" Finding himself on the floor, Darkus started to protest, then heard the heart-stopping click of the door handle. He rolled under the bench and squashed himself against the wall. There was a muffled crunch as Baxter's jar smashed inside his rucksack. Novak pulled the sheepskin rug down to hide him, then sprang around away from the bench. Mater! Darkus saw the ends of Lucretia Cutter's walking sticks and the hem of her long black velvet skirt as she swirled into the room. What do you think you're doing? Darkus heard a squawk, and Novak's feet were lifted off the ground, dangling in the air. Oh, I'm sorry, Novak choked. Darkus's heart was jumping with fright. Lucretia Cutter was shockingly strong. Well, there she is. You're forbidden from entering any of my rooms on this floor. I wanted to see the clowns, Novak rasped. Lucretia Cutter let go of her daughter, and Novak fell to the floor. She coughed and spluttered, gasping for air. You know the penalty for breaking the rules. Novak nodded and looked down. The cells. She bit her lips, looking frightened, and she whispered, But please, not with the bugs. I only wanted to see the clowns. Lucretia Cutter turned away towards the mirror. Look at those two idiots, she snarled. They're revolting. They are ugly, Novak agreed. Their level of species should have been wiped out by now. Are you really going to give them all that money for some beetles? Novak asked. Don't be ridiculous, child. But you said... Novak's voice trailed off and she frowned. You made them sign contracts. I suppose the last will and testament of a person can look like a contract to the untrained eye. Lucretia Cutter laughed softly. Why would you want them to sign a will? None of your business. Novak fell silent and kept her eyes on the floor. Those are my beetles. I made them and I want them back. Lucretia Cutter let out a hiss. I don't know how they escaped from my laboratory, but if those two buffoons have realised what the beetles are capable of, they could ruin everything. I can't let that happen. I'm not ready yet. She banged her sticks on the floor with frustration. I will not let anyone stop me. Not them, not him, nobody. Him? Novak said, catching Darkus's eye under the bench. Who do you mean? Lucretia Cutter spun round and struck her daughter across the head with the silver handle of one of her walking sticks. Darkus struggled not to cry out as Novak was thrown backwards like a rag doll, collapsing in a heap on the floor. How dare you question me, insolent girl? Lucretia Cutter spat. Rigid with fear, Darkus stared at the girl sprawled on the floor. You will spend 2 nights in the cells for your insolence, with the bugs. She tried to stride out of the room. Her skirt swirled up as she went. Where he should have seen an ankle and a shoe, Darkus saw a giant black claw. He pulled back in shock, hitting his head against the wall. Lucretia Cutter paused in the doorway. Darkus closed his eyes and held his breath. There was a long silence. Then she stepped out of the room and the door slid shut. Darkus waited for as long as he could bear before wriggling out from under the bench on his belly, keeping low to the ground. Novak's eyes were closed and she wasn't moving. Novak, he whispered, are you okay? He touched her arm, but she didn't respond. Darkus's blood ran cold. Please, Novak, wake up. He stroked her hair. Please. She groaned and her eyes flickered open. Darkus sighed with relief. Oh, you're okay. She blinked as she looked up at him. Don't look at me. She covered her face with her hands. A nasty purple bruise was blossoming below her eye. You need a doctor. I'm ugly, Novak sobbed. You were so brave, Darkus knelt by her side. She was so angry. She would have been angrier if she'd found you, Novak whispered. He shook his head. Oh, I shouldn't have come here, he said, the image of the black claw flashing through his mind and filling him with dread. Novak put her hand on his and gave him a weak smile. I'm glad you came. We've got to get out of here, Darkus said. Can you get up? She gave a tiny nod. Put your arm round my shoulders. Novak wrapped her arms around Darkus's neck and he lifted her to her feet. They turned towards the door and heard a sickening click as it slid open.